Fusion in Dragon Ball is a real unique ability. You never really know what might happen. There are many different forms of fusion present, with the first ever seen being Namekian Fusion. But the most popular of the two would probably be Potara Fusion, thanks to Vegito and Zamasu, and Metamoran Fusion thanks to Gotenks and Gogeta. But a lot of things can happen when two people fuse, and to me, exploring the possibilities are as exciting as the fusion itself. Old Kai, for instance, when he fused with the witch, not only did he gain magical abilities, but he also got really old. He's supposed to be around the age of Shin, the current Supreme Kai, but fusion did that to him. So that was when I began to wonder what would happen if two traumas were to mix. What if Naruto's loneliness and Sasuke's hatred fused as well? What path would Saruto take? Would the hatred and loneliness multiply? Or would the happy disposition of Naruto and melancholic aura of Sasuke cancel each other out? Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Meeting at the gate didn't take too long. Kakashi had been sure that his students knew that they would need to keep packs ready just in case they got called out of the village at a moment's notice. He was a bit more worried about Saruto. After all, they had yet to properly acclimate to their new reality, but amazingly enough, it didn't take them long to get to the gate. They did indeed show up last, but they did show up in a fairly timely manner, all ready to go. That was quick, Kakashi said, watching them approach. Saruto shrugged. We just went back to Sasuke's apartment, looked through his bag of things, and replaced what we thought we wouldn't want to share. New toothbrush, new underwear, stuff like that. Most everything else was perfect. Also, the Naruto half of me dictates that I bring his Nintendo Scroll DS. Guess I gotta have something to entertain us on moments off the mission. Kakashi nodded. Well, that's good. If we're ready to go, then let's be off. Kakashi turned around and began to lead the group off, Tazuna quietly in tow behind them. As they walked down the path, everything seemed to be going well until Saruto stopped. There's a trap ahead of us, he said simply. It was as if he was unimpressed by the obvious nature of the technique. He looked over his shoulder. Permission to stomp a hole in someone's back end, Kakashi? Permission granted, Kakashi said. Saruto began to walk forward, popping his neck and shoulder, cracking his knuckles. Kakashi found it odd that mere bandits would have knowledge to make use of such a technique as hiding in the surface of a puddle. And as soon as the demon brothers sprung the trap, he knew why. Saruto saw them coming. He threw a kunai with such strength that it caught their chain and robbed their pounce of momentum, leaving them open. The panic was clear in their eyes as they realized the helplessness of their situation, but by that time it was too late. Saruto was already in the air beside them, planting his feet into their jaws. He forced them into two separate directions, the force of his strike snapping the chain that bonded their twin gauntlets. They each hit a tree with such force that the trees cracked behind them. Saruto hit the ground. I think that should suffice. They shouldn't be eating solid food again for about a month. Kakashi had already come to realize that this was a higher rank mission, fit only for Chunin. Yet the way that Saruto was handling situations, Kakashi needed to see what else they could do. So he decided that they would press on. Eventually they'd be caught by Zabuza, who would challenge them. Saruto would step forward, ready to fight, but Kakashi would stop them, believing that Zabuza was above their power. This led to Kakashi, despite use of his Sharingan, being trapped in the water prison. Saruto would shake his head and sigh. He should have trusted me. I could handle this. Saruto began to step forward towards Zabuza with a lot of excess confidence. His arms were crossed, and his face bore an expression that dictated this would be an easy win. Zabuza laughed at the concept that someone so small, especially a genin, could ever hope to match him. Before he could realize it though, Saruto was already in front of him. What? Zabuza raised his blade to defend himself. Zabuza managed to push Saruto back for a moment. What was that? A body flicker? It was so fast that it almost seemed like teleportation. I couldn't even see it. What are you? I am neither Naruto nor Sasuke. I'm the one who'll defeat you. Once again, Saruto rushed at Zabuza with speed that Zabuza couldn't see. They went in for another full frontal assault only to be caught by Zabuza's blade. But suddenly they were behind Zabuza, striking him in the back of the skull. Before he could get his bearings, Saruto was to the side, kicking Zabuza away, freeing Kakashi. The water prison collapsed. Zabuza slid back. He attempted to get to his feet. I need to get out of here, he thought. He looked over his shoulder and saw Haku there with the Senbon ready. Haku threw them, but Saruto saw this and threw his kunai at the Senbon before they could strike. No way! This guy's mine, Saruto shouted as he rushed forward once more. He struck out at Zabuza, knocking him into the tree where Haku had been standing. Haku, realizing their feint wasn't going to work, jumped down, throwing Senbon that Saruto, with the help of his Sharingan, witnessed and deflected. Haku would attempt the demonic mirroring ice crystal technique, but Saruto would be quick enough to break all the mirrors before they could reform. The sight was something that almost startled Kakashi. How could someone like Saruto even exist? That's right, it was impossible. This wasn't natural. This was some odd earring-based ninjutsu. Sasuke and Naruto alone held promise, but together they could very well have been the strongest shinobi to ever exist. It was almost sickening how strong they were. They were well above Chunin at this point, being easily Jonin level, and this was just their starting point. They hardly knew any ninjutsu, or so Kakashi thought. That was until Saruto displayed the water prison technique. How did they learn that, Kakashi wondered, but then he remembered Saruto's Sharingan. They copied the technique, but even if their Sharingan were capable of copying it, they would still need the chakra natures to control and utilize it. How's that possible? This was the same question Zabuza was thinking as he watched Haku get caught in the bubble of water. You like ice so much? Try this on for size. Suddenly, Saruto switched to wind release and used it to quickly lower the temperature of the water until it froze with Haku inside. Now be a good little hunter, Nin. I gotta poach your prey. Saruto stepped forward toward Zabuza. Zabuza began to panic. He pushed up against the tree. For the first time in a very long time, Zabuza was terrified. His body was trembling. Stay away, he shouted, but Saruto continued to draw closer. Deep in his heart, he was terrified. But as Saruto got closer, something snapped in Zabuza, and he realized he was trembling in the face of a teenager. He grit his teeth and grunted, "This is absurd. I will not be defeated by a child." Turning all of his fear into anger, he raised his blade and attempted to strike out at Saruto. Saruto raised his hands to catch the blade. He managed to catch it, but it wasn't easy, and it did force him to his knees. Saruto grunted, trying to hold the blade at this awkward angle. Veins bulged as it seemed like he might lose his grip. Zabuza grinned as he tried to push the heavy blade down on top of them. "I will split you in two," he shouted. Saruto groaned and looked up at Zabuza before summoning his will and snapping the blade in two. Zabuza's face showed nothing but pure confusion and terror as Saruto raised a foot and planted it into his stomach, sending him flying back through a tree and into the next, and so the battle reached its conclusion. Saruto earned a sound victory over his opponents. He walked back to Kakashi and helped them stand. The entirety of Team 7, Tazuna included, were utterly baffled by this show of strength. It was terrifying. From that point on until they reached Tazuna's house, nobody spoke. Once they got there, Kakashi rested. He would have his team train, but it seemed as if Saruto was already beginning to come into his own by himself. He was walking flawlessly on the ceiling as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That being said, Sakura already seemed to know how to do this, so Kakashi gave up. He wondered if Saruto would always be like this, or if Naruto and Sasuke would defuse one day. That was the issue with this strange ninjutsu. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody knew if it could be permanent. Would it take a few weeks? A month? A year? Was this a lifetime? Not that it didn't make Kakashi happy. To have such a powerful shinobi in the village was a plus, but the rest of the village might not see it that way. They could see Saruto as a threat and try to destroy him. Regardless, Genin was no longer something Saruto could call himself. The Chunin exams were coming up, and there was no way that Kakashi would let them miss that. Not with Saruto over here casually debasing the Mist's ninja swordsman. A couple days passed, and Kakashi was back on his feet again. As they made their way to the bridge to protect its construction, it was mostly an uneventful day until Gato and his men showed up. Saruto, though, just stepped out, put his hands together, and utilized the multi-shadow clone jutsu to outnumber Gato's goons 3-1. And what was worse, each of those clones was easily stronger than even the strongest of Gato's men. He pushed them all back off the bridge literally before letting go of his jutsu. As Gato and his men floated in the water, struggling to get back to their boat, Saruto made a powerful statement to them. "The land of waves is now under my protection. This bridge will finish, and you will never again sully these good people's day with your presence. If ever I hear that you're attempting to return, I will personally come and burn your little syndicate to the ground." Gato and his men were not heard from thereafter. The bridge finished and was then named after their fusion warrior who had brought them peace. Returning to the village, Kakashi would go to Hiruzen and begin to explain what happened. "That's amazing! Saruto did this all by himself." Kakashi nodded. "The strength Saruto displays is well beyond any genin I've ever seen. Frankly, I'm certain he'd be one of the Leaf's strongest jonin as we speak, but he still has a lot to learn. I was thinking of submitting him to the Chunin exams to see what becomes of him. Is that allowable?" Hiruzen shrugged. "I don't see why not." I was asking because of the number in my team, Kakashi said. We are a team, but there are only 2 physical people on it right now, Saruto and Sakura. I know the exams require the submission of a 3-man team, but Hiruzen thought about it. Well, Saruto is the fusion of 2 genin, which means that he should count as 2 people, but even if that's a bit shaky, I can make an exception for you. Kakashi offered a slight bow of respect. Thank you, Lord Fourth. Hiruzen waved him off and continued with his work. Kakashi returned to Saruto and Sakura. Hey guys, would you like to take the Chunin exams? Saruto would jump in excitement. Heck yeah, I want to take it. Sakura smiled and nodded. I'll take it if they do. Kakashi offered a smiling eye from just above his mask. Good, because you couldn't do it unless you all agreed. There's a place to sign up at the academy. Head there and get going. Do it by sundown or you won't be included. The 2 of them nodded. They began to head downstairs where they were caught by Rock Lee. Wait up for a minute, he said as he approached them. Saruto looked back. Yeah? Rock Lee looked over at them. Is it true that you fused? The last Uchiha and the Naruto kid? Saruto nodded. Yeah, what about it? Rock Lee entered a fighting stance. I would like to test myself against your strength, he shouted as he ready to fight. Saruto smiled. Are you so sure you want to do that? I bodied a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Lee's face grew more determined. I knew a genin who killed multiple swordsmen of the mist at one time. Were you that genin? Saruto asked. Lee shook his head. No, but I am trained in his discipline. Do you accept my challenge? Saruto took a breath and let it out with a sigh and a smile. I accept. Show me what you got. Saruto crossed his arms and waited for Lee to attack. Lee rushed at Saruto with his fists ready. Saruto blocked each attack as it came in. As he did so, Saruto's Sharingan was copying each attack and storing it for later use. Saruto was using this as a moment to perfect his own taijutsu, but so far Lee was not a threat. Saruto just continued blocking Lee's attack, his speed above Lee to the point that if Saruto went all out, Lee would not have been able to recognize and react before he hit the floor. As Lee continued to attack, he decided to pull back. If you're so tough, then will you be able to take this? Lee began to awaken his gates, stopping once the 3rd gate was opened. Lee's body seemed to turn a blood red as an aura of evaporating sweat arced about him, enveloping him. The smell was as intense as the chakra being put off. If you are as strong as you say, Lee began, then do not even try to dodge my next strike. Saruto's smile slowly faded into a serious scowl. Then bring me your best. Lee rushed at Saruto with a shout. Saruto squared his feet for a proper stance. Lee went to strike Saruto, with Saruto purposefully catching the fist on his forehead, only sliding back a little as wind blew back behind him, threatening to knock Sakura off her feet. Lee stood there in surprise as his attack seemed to do little. Saruto stood there, huffing and puffing from either anger or exertion. A little blood ran down from under Lee's fist. Whether that was because Lee busted his knuckles or because he drew blood was still a question up in the air. Perhaps it was both. Either way though, it didn't change the fact that Saruto no-selled this attack. He took on everything Lee had at the moment without even a guard, and he withstood it. Saruto growled. Now it's my turn. With incredible speed that Lee could not see, Saruto spun his body around before planting a kick right into Lee's chest, sending him flying back into the wall, leaving a crater. Lee fell forward and caught himself. Saruto spoke. I'm impressed that you even remained conscious after that. You've earned my respect. At about that time, Guy rushed in. What is going on here? Sakura looked to Guy. That boy challenged Saruto to a battle and Saruto beat him. Guy sniffed. That smell. That heavy perspiration. Lee, did you use the gates? Lee looked up. Yes, Guy-sensei. I know I broke my self-rule, but I needed to... Prove yourself? Guy asked, a hint of anger in his voice. Lee shook his head. Test myself. I didn't care if anyone praised me for this fight. I just needed to know. Guy helped Lee stand. You're going to be punished for this. I hope you know that, Lee. Lee nodded as he gripped his head. Guy looked to Saruto. I'm sorry for the trouble my student has given you. You should be on your way. If you don't hurry, you'll miss your chance to enter the exams. Saruto turned around and left with Sakura. She looked to him. You should have taken it a little easier on that guy. It looked like you nearly killed him. Saruto looked over at Sakura. Maybe, but he knew what he was getting into when he challenged me. He wanted it, and for that, he has my respect. Sakura listened to what he said and felt a shiver run down her spine. The same feeling she'd gotten with Sasuke, but now, somehow, it was increased. She had never thought that any part of her could like anything about Naruto, but there was something in him that was being displayed through Saruto. There was an honor there. There was pride, yes, but it was balanced with honor and mercy, with kindness and strength. It was like Naruto and Sasuke balanced out the worst parts of each other's personalities and formed someone better than either of them had ever hoped to be a part. And now Sakura felt as though she was falling deeper and deeper into infatuation as she spent time around him. Making their way to the academy, they would sign up and await the start of the exams. The next day, they would both meet at the academy, where the first third of the exams was to begin. They were taken into a room not too dissimilar from the classroom they had previously used while attempting to become genin. There, they were given a written test, a sheet of paper covered in questions. As Saruto looked these over, he began to reflect on how this seemed to go well over his head, how it seemed to go even over a Chunin's head. Through Sasuke's intellect, Saruto knew there must be a gimmick to this. The true test was an if they could cheat properly without being caught. That was the trick. So Saruto began using his Sharingan to search for the correct answers, and then wrote them down. As he finished, he kicked his feet up on the desk, much to the chagrin of the proctor. He'd been hoping to force the genin into a state of panic to see what they were really made of, but Saruto was too sure of himself. We'll see how he handles the final question. As the time reached its conclusion, Proctor Marino informed them all of the final question. I bet you think you're all so tough, huh? Think you got it all figured out. Well, let me tell you about this last question, he said as he leaned over his desk, staring straight at Saruto. This question will be the hardest of them all. And no, there's no cheat sheet anywhere in class for you to look at if that's what you were doing before. Saruto sat there and listened, not much caring. Marino began to chuckle. You think this is all a game? Let me change the stakes for you then, for all the class. This question will be an everything or nothing question. If you wish to pass this test, get it right. But if you fail the test. And to add even higher stakes, allow me to inform you that if any of you fail to answer this question, you'll never be able to take the test to become a Chunin again. That's right, you'll forever be genin, with no hopes of becoming anything more than that. Your future weighs entirely on this one question. If you refuse to take it, you won't be penalized, and may try for Chunin later. But if you take it and fail, that's it. So what'll it be? Will you take this final question, or will you save your careers and leave? Various genin would then stand and begin to leave the room. As they did, Saruto watched them. Sasuke's intelligence was a little nervous, but he believed in his intelligence. And this, mixed with Naruto's gutsiness, ensured that there would be no choice but to take the question. This blew Ibiki Marino's mind. You're really that sure of yourself? Then fine, we'll leave this up to chance. Everyone in the room, by taking this test, you passed. Everyone but Saruto. Saruto really will need to take this question. You can quit at any time, Saruto. Now, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 5. What is it? Saruto's face scrunched up in confusion. You're asking me to bet my future on a 20% random chance? That is, if you're even going to play it fair at all? Marino nodded. Either pick a number or leave. Saruto sat back and thought about it. 3 would be too obvious. 2 in the middle. 4 and 2 would be good options as well, but by the looks of this guy's gonna want me to fail, so he'll pick a number that is unexpected. Saruto smiled. The number you're thinking of is 1. Ibiki sat there for a moment and sighed. You got it right. Fine. You passed. Now get the heck out of this classroom before I change my mind. Saruto stood with a laugh and began to walk out. As he did, Marino reflected on the gutsiness of that move. In actuality, Marino had been thinking the number 3 the whole time, but the very fact that Saruto, in the face of all of that, chose a number anyway without flinching, well, that was plenty to prove the kind of person he really was. He was either incredibly intelligent or so gutsy that he was actually stupid. Either way, he had earned Marino's respect. They would move on to the second round of the exams, the Forest of Death. Each team was given one of 2 scrolls and commanded to get the other. In order to finish, they would need both. Team 7 was given the Heaven Scroll, and they would need to find the Earth Scroll. But unaware to Team 7, someone had entered the village and was seeking to cause mayhem. It was Orochimaru, and he was here for Saruto. Having heard what Saruto was, what he was capable of, Orochimaru knew he couldn't miss the shot to have a body as powerful as this, with as much potential as this. He too entered the exams under the guise of Shiore of Kusagakure just to get close. As Saruto and Sakura rushed through the forest, Saruto told her to stay near. He kept his Sharingan open for anyone who might possess the Earth Scroll they needed. As they moved through the forest, of course, they would be stopped when they were found out by Orochimaru. He would try to intimidate them with his killing intent, and while this may have worked on Sakura, it had almost no effect on Saruto. Saruto sighed. Please tell me there's more to you than an icy stare. Orochimaru began to chuckle. You really are the best vessel for me. Saruto cocked his head. Vessel? Orochimaru began to explain as he pulled the disguise from his face. Since we're soon going to share a body with each other, I might as well tell you. I'm not really a genin hoping to become Chunin. No, I came for two purposes. The first was to destroy this blasted village, and the second was to take your body as my own. Orochimaru licked his lips. And now that I see how strong you are, I can hardly contain my excitement. Orochimaru would rush at Saruto. Saruto would see him coming. That's a razor-sharp chakra, he said as he took a few steps back. He knew that he couldn't underestimate this opponent. This one was as strong as Zabuza, but had his chakra controlled down to the very last unit. Saruto knew that he would have to keep his eyes open. They started off with taijutsu. Saruto used his Sharingan to both record and help adapt to Orochimaru's fighting style. He called on the various taijutsu he knew, as well as the styles he had picked up from others he had fought. With them, he managed to hold his own. And as he was now recording Orochimaru's techniques, he began to push back. Orochimaru would weave hand signs and launch an arm whip of snakes at Saruto. Saruto would use his fire release to burn them away before they could even get to him. Orochimaru would jump through the flames to attack Saruto, causing Saruto to somersault back to avoid the strikes. Two other Orochimarus came after him, shadow clones, not too unlike the ones he had used on the bridge against Gato and his men. He had to admit, this was impressive. This Orochimaru knew what he was doing, but he messed with the wrong village. Being pushed against a tree, Orochimaru's true self emerged from it, hoping to bite Saruto's neck. Saruto saw this coming, however, and gripped Orochimaru's throat, pulling him from the tree. You plan to destroy my village? I'll show you what happens to people who threaten my friends. He smashed Orochimaru's face into the ground before throwing him into the air. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. He would produce a flame so powerful that it could be seen from outside the forest. When the flames had subsided, Orochimaru was completely gone. Saruto walked over to Sakura and woke her up. What happened? She asked. Just some snake guy. He might have been an enemy combatant from a rival village. He didn't seem like a Genin, but he's gone now. And so the two of them continued through the forest. That was until they heard a cry for help. Saruto and Sakura both stopped. What is it? She asked. Saruto looked around. I heard someone crying out. Saruto, without a second thought, began searching for the origin of the cry. He found a girl laying up against a tree. He walked over towards her. Wait, Sakura said. It could be a trap. Saruto stopped for a moment and looked around her. He then knelt down in front of her. Be honest with me. Is this a trap? The girl looked at him with a tired gaze. No. Good enough for me. Saruto began to check on her. She doesn't look injured. Maybe it's just heat stroke. Let's get her to the river. Maybe we can help her out. Saruto lifted her up and began walking toward the river. Once there, he knelt down and dipped her in. Leaning her head against his leg, he kept the water from completely covering her. That should cool her down, he said. He then looked around. So, where are your teammates? They thought I was dead weight, so they left you behind, Sakura said, finishing the girl's sentence. I was really close with them. I thought they were my family, my brothers. I know I wasn't as strong as them, but I didn't think they would leave me behind like that. I asked them why, and they said it was like being in the field. The mission came first. But I know what they meant. We don't want you getting in the way of our futures. So they left me. Saruto was gritting his teeth. They're worse than scum. As he sat there, he lamented the fate this girl had been given. Her team had abandoned her because she wasn't as useful as they wanted. He sat there with her for a moment and looked back at Sakura. You're a hidden leaf shinobi, right? Saruto asked. The girl looked up at him. Yeah? Saruto smiled. What say you join our team? Huh? She questioned. Join your team? Saruto nodded. At least until the end of the exams. As it turns out, I can count as either 1 or 2 people, which means our team technically only has 2 individuals on it. We could always use a 3rd teammate. What's your name? It's Haruko, she said. Saruto smiled. Well, Haruko, welcome to the team. He lifted her up on his shoulders. Together they began to move forward. As he did so, he kept an eye open. The moment he spotted a 2-man team headed north, he sat Haruko down. What did you say the name of your teammates were? Kenzo and Riku, she said. Saruto nodded. Stay here with her, Sakura. I'll be right back. Saruto then began jumping through the trees. As he did so, he would catch up with the 2 boys. I would assume your names are Kenzo and Riku. The 2 looked at each other as if to ask how he knew. They then looked back. Maybe. What's it to you? That was all the confirmation Saruto needed. He moved like lightning, putting a fist in Kenzo's stomach. The boy flew back into a tree and then hit the ground. No doubt he had a couple busted ribs from that. Riku wanted to try and escape. Coward, Saruto said. He swept the boy's feet, causing him to fall and bust his chin on the tree limb they were standing on. Before he could fall though, Saruto caught him. He lifted him up. Question, do you know a girl named Haruko? Riku nodded. Yeah? Saruto looked down and saw the earth scroll. He took it from the boy. Haruko sends her regards, you little turd. He punched the boy in the face and then tossed him into the bushes below. And I hope they're thorny too, he shouted down, a bit of Naruto slipping through. Saruto rushed back to Sakura and Haruko. He picked Haruko back up and carried her to the gate. Once they entered, they were met by Irika, who asked who the girl was. Saruto declared her their teammate, Haruko. Irika looked through the papers and told Saruto that she was a part of another team with Kenzo and Riku. Saruto proceeded to tell Irika that she was a strong shinobi and that her crew betrayed her, and that she beat them and took the scroll for herself. Needing a new crew, she joined up with Team 7, not yet willing to give up. Then why is she unconscious on your back, Saruto? Irika asked. Saruto looked over his shoulder at her and then back at Irika before smiling. Irika sighed. I assume you picked up a lost kitten then. Sadly, I can't let her pass, because she's not actually a member of your team. The only way I could pass her is if you said that she got your Heaven Scroll, but then Team 7 would be disqualified. It's either Team 7 or Haruko. Which is it? You can't make us choose between that, Saruto said. She was already abandoned once. I can't just do that to her a second time. It was at this time that Haruko began to move. She gave up her scroll to Sakura. It's okay, Saruto. You helped me get this far. I'm grateful you did a good thing for me. Let me repay it with my scroll. Go knock 'em dead. Become a Chunin for me. Irika would then call over the medical nin and they'd put her on a stretcher. Saruto watched her go. She smiled and waved. I'll be cheering for you. Irika would pat Saruto's shoulder. You did good, Saruto. That's what it means to be a shinobi. Saruto then remembered something important. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there was a shinobi in the forest that attacked us. He said his name was Orochimaru. He said he was here to destroy the village and take my body. He's currently feeding the flowers with his ashes. Irika looked down at Saruto, unsure of what to make of that statement. Perhaps we should tell this to the Hokage. The third and final round began. Exhibition matches between each of the shinobi individually. Teams were no longer required. Saruto was set up to face off against Kiba and Akamaru. Saruto almost had no issue against him at all and would pass on to the next round. Sakura would get double KO'd with Ino, which meant that she was out, and after this they would each get a month off to train and rest. Saruto spent most of his time lazing about. He'd return to the exams where his next match was against Neji Hyuga. Saruto would nearly be taken by surprise with the gentle fist technique when his shoulder was struck. Losing all feeling and control in his arm, he knew he'd have to be more careful. He would manage to get one on Neji though, and once he struck him once, he didn't give Neji any time to retaliate. He would defeat the Hyuga. The final match was against Gaara, who had previously hurt Lee in their own battle. The cruelty in Gaara's eyes spoke volumes. Saruto's speed was well above Lee's though, and this meant that he could easily get around the sand barrier. His strength was also leagues above Gaara's. In the end, Saruto defeated Gaara too and was named champion of the exhibition matches. Given his actions, both he and Sakura were granted the rank of Chunin. This was where Saruto expected his life to get even better. After all, a higher rank meant tougher missions, more excitement like the Land of Waves. And he was sure to get that, but not until he was first called into the office by Hiruzen. Entering in, he saw a man with long white hair sitting there by the Hokage's desk. Yes, Lord Fourth, Saruto asked. Hiruzen bid him in and asked him to sit. Hiruzen started off by commending Saruto on his actions in the Chunin exams, and then congratulating him on becoming a Chunin. It was then that he cut to the chase. We've not seen a shinobi with your potential, possibly ever. And you only seem to be growing stronger and stronger by the day, he said. I'm sure by now you know about the 9 tails that lives inside of you. Mizuki surely told you. Saruto nodded. I know of it, yes. Hiruzen then continued. That tailed beast could be a source of strength for you, but you'll need to train to utilize it. If you can master your tailed beast, I doubt that anyone would be able to defeat you. For that cause, I've called up Jiraiya here. He knows of the tailed beasts and will gladly train you. Jiraiya then stood and offered his hand. He turned to face Saruto. It's a pleasure to meet you, Saruto. Saruto shook his hand. The pleasure's mine. And that's where I'm gonna call it for the night. I hope you enjoyed this video. I can't tell you how excited I am to get into the Shippuden era for this series. I want to see what it'll be like when Saruto inevitably faces off against the heavy hitters of the Naruto universe like Itachi, Pain, and Madara. I guess we'll just have to wait for it though. If you liked the video, please feel free to let us know in the comments, and don't forget to click that thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell too. At least one more part of this is coming. You wouldn't want to miss that, right? I'm sure you wouldn't. And hey, while you wait, be sure to check out another one of these videos you see on your screen now. They are certified bangers. Anyway, until next time, peace out.